The judge's gavel came down hard. "Remove that medal. You didn't earn it."
The courtroom gasped as the decorated Navy SEAL stood frozen, her silver star gleaming under the fluorescent lights. But what happened next would destroy more than just one man's career. It would expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of military command.
Hey, real quick, comment your city below. I'm always amazed by how many places these stories reach.
And if you're into true stories with real emotion,
make sure you're subscribed.
Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, a helicopter crash that shattered both her legs, and firefights that claimed half her unit. The silver star pinned to her uniform wasn't just metal and ribbon. It was blood, sacrifice, and the screams of brothers she couldn't save. Now she stood in a military courtroom, facing Judge Advocate General Marcus Holloway, a man whose own service record consisted of 20 years behind a desk and 0 days in combat.
"This hearing will come to order," Holloway announced,
his voice dripping with barely concealed contempt.
"We are here to address allegations that Lieutenant
Commander Chun fraudulently obtained her silver star through false testimony and exaggerated claims of
heroism." Sarah's jaw tightened.
She shifted her weight, the titanium rods in her legs sending familiar sparks of pain through her body. The allegations had surfaced 3 months ago, dropped like a bomb into her life by an anonymous complaint. Someone claimed she had lied about her actions during Operation Red Dawn, the mission that earned her the nation's 3rd highest combat decoration. The courtroom was packed. Fellow SEALs sat rigid in the gallery, their faces carved from stone. News cameras lined the back wall, their lenses hungry for her destruction.
This wasn't just a hearing.
It was a public execution. Lieutenant Commander Chun, Holloway continued, adjusting his glasses with theatrical precision.
"You claimed that on November 7th,
you single-handedly held off an enemy assault while dragging 2 wounded teammates to safety. You claim you engaged multiple hostiles while injured yourself. Convenient that most witnesses are dead, wouldn't you say?" Sarah's attorney, Captain Rebecca Walsh, shot to her feet.
"Objection.
The judge is testifying instead of presiding."
Holloway smiled coldly.
"Overruled. I'll ask my questions however I see fit, counselor." The first twist came when Holloway produced his evidence. A report, allegedly from Sarah's commanding officer, stating that she had remained at the extraction point during the firefight, that she had never engaged the enemy, that her injuries came from the helicopter crash afterward, not from combat. This is your CO's signature, is it not? Holloway held up the document like a trophy. Sarah stared at the paper. Commander James Reeves had written that report. Reeves, who died 6 months ago in a training accident. Reeves, who couldn't defend what he'd written or explain the context. The timing felt surgical. "My commanding officer wrote many reports," Sarah said carefully. "That one appears to be an initial incident summary, written before full debriefings were conducted. The final after-action report tells a different story. How convenient that you now claim the deceased wrote a preliminary report incorrectly," Holloway sneered. "Perhaps he wrote the truth, and you convince others to lie for you later." The hearing dragged through the afternoon like a blade across skin. Holloway systematically dismantled every piece of evidence supporting Sarah's account. He questioned her injuries, suggesting they were less severe than reported. He implied her teammates covered for her out of misplaced loyalty. He painted her as an opportunist who exploited tragedy for glory. Sarah remained composed, but inside, she was calculating. Something was deeply wrong. Holloway had too much information, too many specific details that should have been classified. Someone had fed him this case, prepared him meticulously, and aimed him at her like a weapon dot as the sun set outside the courthouse windows. Casting long shadows across the room, Holloway made his move. "Lieutenant Commander Chun, I am ordering you to remove that silver star immediately. You have dishonored every service member who truly earned their decorations. You have dishonored this uniform. Remove it now." The courtroom erupted. SEALs in the gallery surged forward, shouting protests. Captain Walsh was on her feet, citing regulation after regulation that prohibited such an order during ongoing proceedings. The bailiffs moved to restore order, but the chaos swelled like a wave. Sarah stood perfectly still in the center of the storm. Her hand moved slowly to the medal on her chest, fingers brushing the ribbon. She thought of the moment she'd earned it. The Taliban fighters pouring down the hillside. Corporal Martinez bleeding out from a gut shot. Petty Officer Davidson with his leg nearly severed by shrapnel. The sound of her M4 running dry. The weight of Davidson as she dragged him with one arm while firing her sidearm with the other. Martinez's blood soaking into the dirt as she went back for him. Her own leg screaming in agony from the crash injuries she'd already sustained. She thought of the 23 confirmed kills she'd made that day. The grenade she'd thrown that collapsed a section of enemy trench. The radio call she'd made that brought in the Apaches that finally turned the tide. And she thought of the 3 men she couldn't save. The 3 who died before the helicopters arrived. The 3 whose faces visited her every night in the darkness. Her fingers closed around the medal. Then she released it. No, she said quietly. The courtroom fell silent so abruptly it felt like a physical force. What did you say? Holloway's face flushed red. I said no, sir. Sarah's voice remained calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. You don't have the authority to order me to remove this medal. That power rests with the Secretary of the Navy, and only after a proper investigation and appeals process. You know this. I know this. Everyone in this room knows this. So I have to wonder why you're overstepping your authority so flagrantly. Holloway's eyes narrowed. You dare defy a direct order? I dare follow regulations, sir. Something you seem to have forgotten. That night, Sarah sat in her small apartment, her legs propped up, ice packs wrapped around the titanium that had replaced bone. Captain Walsh sat across from her, laptop open, files scattered across the coffee table. He's going to push for contempt charges, Walsh said. This just got a lot worse. It was already as bad as it could get, Sarah replied. Rebecca, someone orchestrated this. The timing, the evidence, the way he had that preliminary report, but not the final one. Someone wanted me in that courtroom today, wanted me humiliated publicly. Who? And why? Sarah had been asking herself the same question for 3 months. She'd made enemies. Every SEAL did. But this felt personal and professional simultaneously. It felt like someone cleaning house. Her phone buzz. A text from an unknown number. Meet me at the Anchor Bar. Come alone. I have information about your hearing. A friend of Reeves. Sarah showed the text to Walsh, who immediately shook her head. Absolutely not. This could be a setup, or it could be the break we need. Sarah was already reaching for her jacket. Reeves trusted people I trust. If one of them knows something, I need to hear it. The Anchor Bar was a dive near the naval base, the kind of place where sailors went to forget and remember simultaneously. Sarah arrived 20 minutes early, positioning herself where she could watch the entrance. Her hand rested near the concealed carry pistol. She never left home without any more. The man who walked in at exactly 9 p.m. was not what she expected. Admiral Vincent Caruso, retired, walked with the careful dignity of someone who'd spent 40 years commanding respect. He spotted Sarah, nodded once, and made his way to her booth. Commander Chun, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Thank you for coming. You knew Commander Reeves? I knew him well. He served under me for 5 years. Caruso's weathered face was grave. He was a good man, and he didn't die in a training accident. The second twist hit like a punch to the gut. What are you talking about? Sarah leaned forward. James came to me 2 weeks before he died. He was scared, Commander. Said he'd been approached by someone in JAG, asked to alter records from Operation Red Dawn. They wanted him to change the after-action reports, make it look like you never left the LZ. He refused. They offered him money. He refused again. Then they threatened him. Sarah's blood ran cold. Who? He didn't know names. Just that it came from high up, and involved more than just you. James said there was a pattern. Combat awards being challenged, records being altered, all targeting operators who'd served under a specific command structure. What command structure? Caruso pulled out a folded piece of paper. On it were 12 names. Sarah recognized 8 of them immediately. All SEALs. All decorated. All served together at various points over the last decade. Notice anything? Caruso asked. Sarah's eyes scanned the list again. Then it clicked. We all served under Vice Admiral Thomas Brennan at some point. Different units, different times, but we all fell under his operational command. Exactly. And here's the interesting part. 3 of these operators have already been quietly pushed out of the service. Awards challenged, records questioned, careers destroyed. 2 more are under investigation right now. You're number 6. Why? What does Brennan gain from destroying his own people? Caruso's expression darkened. That's what James was trying to figure out when he died. His car went off a cliff on a clear night on a road he'd driven 1,000 times. The official report said mechanical failure, but James was meticulous about maintenance. I had a friend look at the wreckage unofficially. The brake lines showed signs of tampering. Sarah felt the world tilt. This wasn't about her silver star. This was about silencing people, and she'd just paying a target on her own back by refusing Holloway's order. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Why risk getting involved? Because James Reeves was like a son to me, and someone murdered him. Because I spent 40 years in the Navy, and I will not watch it be corrupted from within. Caruso stood. Be careful, Commander. You've made powerful people very nervous. Watch your back, and trust no one in the official chain of command. He walked out, leaving Sarah with a list of names and a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of naval. Leadership. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat at her laptop cross-referencing names, dates, and operations. Captain Walsh arrived at dawn with coffee and a grim expression. I did some digging, Walsh said. Judge Holloway received his current position 18 months ago. Guess who recommended him for the promotion? Brennan. And here's something else. Every case Holloway has presided over in the last year has involved special operations personnel. He has a 93% conviction rate. That's unheard of in military courts, where the burden of proof is supposed to be high. Sarah pulled up Brennan's service record. Vice Admiral Thomas Brennan, decorated career, spotless reputation. Currently serving as Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Warfare Systems. He had access to everything. Personnel records, classified operation details, budget allocations worth billions. What if it's not about the decorations at all? Sarah said slowly. What if the awards are just the excuse? What if he's removing people who might have seen something, who might know something that could expose him? Walsh followed her logic. You're saying Brennan is involved in something illegal, and he's systematically eliminating anyone who could connect him to it. Operation Red Dawn, Sarah said suddenly. We were providing security for an inspection team. They were auditing equipment transfers, making sure weapons and supplies were going where they were supposed to go. I remember because the inspector was paranoid, kept saying something didn't add up in the inventory records. She pulled up her old mission logs, scanning through the details she'd filed years ago. Then she found it. The inspector's name, Colonel Patricia Vance, Defense Logistics Agency. A quick search revealed that Colonel Vance had retired suddenly 6 months after Operation Red Dawn, citing health reasons. She now lived in Montana, far from Washington and military politics. We need to talk to her, Sarah said. That's a long shot. She might not remember, might not want to get involved. It's the only shot we have. Sarah made the call. Colonel Vance answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. When Sarah identified herself and mentioned Operation Red Dawn, there was a long silence. I was waiting for someone to ask, Vance finally said. I was waiting for years. Colonel Vance agreed to a video call. The woman who appeared on screen looked older than her years, with the haunted eyes of someone carrying a dangerous secret. I found discrepancies, Vance began without preamble. Millions of dollars in equipment that was signed for, but never actually delivered to the units in Afghanistan. It was sophisticated. Invoices matched, serial numbers checked out on paper, but the physical inventory didn't exist. Someone was skimming supplies and selling them on the black market. How much are we talking about? Walsh asked. Over 3 years? Conservative estimate, $200 million. Weapons, ammunition, body armor, communications equipment. Enough to supply a small army. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together. You reported this. I tried. I filed my report through proper channels. Then I was called into a meeting with Vice Admiral Brennan. He was very polite, very concerned. He thanked me for my diligence and said he would handle it personally. 2 weeks later, I was informed that my findings were based on accounting errors that had been corrected. Case closed? But you didn't believe that. I knew what I'd found, so I kept digging quietly. I discovered that the equipment was being diverted through a series of shell companies. The trail was complex, but it led back to individuals connected to Brennan's staff. Before I could gather enough evidence, I started receiving threats. Someone left a dead cat on my porch. My car was vandalized. Then my daughter's school called to say a man had been asking questions about her, trying to find out her schedule. Vance's voice cracked. I have 2 daughters, Commander. I chose them over the truth. I took early retirement, moved across the country, and kept my mouth shut. I'm ashamed of that, but I don't regret it. The people on my list, Sarah said. Were any of them involved in that operation or similar logistics missions? I'd need to see the list. Sarah read the names. Vance confirmed that 8 of the 12 had provided security or support for logistics operations, where she found discrepancies. He's been cleaning house, Sarah said. Anyone who might have seen something, who might have noticed the discrepancies or could corroborate an investigation. He's been systematically destroying their credibility so that if they ever spoke up, no one would believe them. The third and final twist came when Walsh pulled up a news article. From 2 days ago, Vice Admiral Brennan is being considered for promotion to Admiral N, Commander of U.S. Fleet Forces Command. The Senate confirmation hearing is in 3 weeks. If he gets that position, he'll have authority over the entire operational fleet. He'll be untouchable. Everything suddenly made terrible sense. Brennan was making his final move, eliminating the last potential threats, before ascending to a position where he'd be protected by layers of authority and political insulation. Sarah's hearing wasn't just about her. It was the opening shot in a final purge. We need evidence, Sarah said. Testimony isn't enough. We need documentation, financial records, something that directly ties Brennan to the theft and cover-up. How? Walsh asked. Everything will be classified or destroyed by now. Sarah thought of the 3 men who died on that hillside in Afghanistan. She thought of Commander Reeves, murdered for trying to do the right thing. She thought of the 8 operators who'd already been driven out, their careers destroyed. Their service dishonored. She thought of the medal on her chest and what it truly represented, not glory, but the willingness to stand and fight when running would be easier. Then we forced him to make a mistake, she said. The next hearing was scheduled for 1 week later. Sarah arrived in full dress uniform, every ribbon and medal precisely placed. The courtroom was even more crowded this time. The story had gone viral. Disabled SEAL defies judge's order, faces contempt charges and possible court-martial. But Sarah wasn't alone this time. In the gallery sat Admiral Caruso, Colonel Vance, and 6 of the operators from the list who'd flown in overnight. They sat in a row, their uniforms heavy with their own decorations, their presence a silent testimony. Judge Holloway entered, his expression thunderous. Lieutenant Commander Chun, you stand accused of contempt of court and failure to obey a lawful order. How do you plead? Not guilty, sir. Then let's proceed. Holloway shuffled his papers. I have here additional evidence that has come to my attention, reports of insubordination during your service, questions about other commendations you've received. It appears your pattern of dishonesty extends. I have evidence to present. Sarah interrupted. Holloway's head snapped up. You're not recognized. I'm presenting new evidence relevant to these proceedings. Sarah nodded to Walsh, who stood and approached the bench with a tablet. This is highly irregular, Holloway protested, but Walsh was already speaking. Your Honor, we have testimony from Colonel Patricia Vance, Defense Logistics Agency, regarding Operation Red Dawn and the circumstances surrounding the actions for which Lieutenant Commander Chun received her Silver Star. Colonel Vance was the senior inspector, present during the operation. Holloway's face paled slightly. The final after-action reports are already in evidence. Yes, sir. But Colonel Vance has information about why preliminary reports may have been altered, and about individuals who had motive to discredit operators who served on that mission. Sarah watched Holloway carefully. He was trying to maintain composure, but his eyes kept darting to someone in the back of the courtroom. She followed his gaze to a Navy captain she didn't recognize, who was already on his phone. I'll allow testimony, but it must be relevant to the charges at hand, Holloway said tightly. Colonel Vance was called via video link. She testified about the inspection, about the discrepancies she'd found, about the operators who provided security, including Sarah, and about the subsequent cover-up and threats she'd received. Holloway tried to object repeatedly, claiming the testimony was beyond scope, but Captain Walsh skillfully linked every element back to the central question. Why would someone want to discredit the operators from that mission? Then Walsh called Admiral Caruso, who testified about Commander Reeves' suspicious death and the investigations into other operators. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. News cameras zoomed in, capturing every moment. This wasn't about a medal anymore. This was about corruption at the highest levels. Holloway called for a recess, his hands shaking as he gathered his papers. Sarah watched him hurry from the courtroom, followed closely by the unknown Navy captain. Now we wait, Walsh whispered. They didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, naval investigators arrived at the courthouse. Within 2 hours, Holloway was escorted from the building in handcuffs. The unknown captain was also detained. The full story emerged over the following days. Faced with evidence and testimony, Holloway made a deal. He provided documentation of his communications with Brennan's office, emails instructing him to target specific operators, and payments made to his offshore accounts. The captain turned out to be one of Brennan's aides, who'd been coordinating the campaign to discredit and remove potential witnesses, with Holloway's testimony as leverage. Investigators obtained warrants for Brennan's financial records. The web of shell companies unraveled. The paper trail led directly to accounts controlled by Brennan and 3 other senior officers. The theft hadn't been $200 million. It had been closer to $500 million over a decade. Vice Admiral Thomas Brennan was arrested at his Pentagon office. His confirmation hearing was canceled. The investigation expanded to include the other officers involved and the defense contractors who facilitated the scheme. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the same courtroom for a very different hearing. Judge Advocate General Patricia Morrison, newly assigned to replace Holloway, addressed her with respect that felt foreign after months of persecution. Lieutenant Commander Chun, this court owes you an apology. The charges against you have been dismissed with prejudice. Your Silver Star has been fully validated, and I am pleased to inform you that the Secretary of the Navy has ordered a formal review to ensure no other service members have been unjustly targeted. Morrison paused, consulting her notes. Additionally, I have been authorized to inform you that you are being awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for your courage in exposing corruption within the Naval Command structure. Your actions have led to the largest prosecution of senior military officers in a generation and the recovery of over $400 million in stolen government property. The courtroom erupted in applause. Sarah's fellow SEALs stood, saluting her. Admiral Caruso wiped tears from his eyes. Colonel Vance, present in person this time, nodded with satisfaction, but Sarah felt the weight of it all. Commander Reeves was still dead. The three operators who'd already been forced out were trying to rebuild shattered careers. 8 years of theft and corruption had enabled America's enemies and endangered American troops. After the ceremony, Sarah stood outside the courthouse, the winter sun weak against her face. Captain Walsh approached, now simply Rebecca, her attorney duties complete. "You did it," Rebecca said. "You took down a vice admiral and exposed a conspiracy. You're a hero twice over." Sarah touched the silver star on her chest. "I just wanted to keep what I earned." "What they earned?" She gestured toward the gallery where the ghosts of fallen teammates seemed to stand. "Martinez, Davidson, Rodriguez. They earned this. I was just the one who lived to wear it. What happens now?" Rebecca asked. Sarah watched as Admiral Caruso emerged from the courthouse, surrounded by reporters. He was testifying before Congress next week, helping ensure that the systematic reforms would prevent such corruption in the future. She thought about Holloway, facing 20 years in military prison. She thought about Brennan, who would spend the rest of his life behind bars, his legacy destroyed. His family shamed. She thought about justice, and whether it was ever truly complete. "Now I go back to teaching," Sarah said. She'd been assigned to train new SEAL candidates while recovering from her injuries. "I make sure the next generation understands that the uniform means something. That honor isn't just a word we throw around. That some things are worth standing for, even when standing costs everything." Rebecca smiled. "That sounds like something a hero would say." "Then you're not listening." Sarah started walking toward her car, her gait still uneven, her legs still aching with every step. "A hero is someone who does the extraordinary. I just did what any service member should do. I told the truth and refused to back down when liars tried to silence me. That's not heroism. That's the minimum standard." But as she drove away from the courthouse, past the news vans and the crowds and the circus of attention, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The metal on her chest felt lighter now. Less like a weight and more like what it was supposed to be, recognition of a debt that could never truly be repaid, but should always be honored. Somewhere, she hoped, Commander Reeves was resting easier. Somewhere Martinez and Davidson and Rodriguez were watching, satisfied that the fight they died protecting meant something after all. And somewhere, in offices and command centers across the military, officers who might have considered bending the rules or looking the other way were learning a hard lesson. In the end, the truth has a way of surfacing, and the cost of corruption always comes due. Sarah Chen had gone to war in Afghanistan, but her greatest battle had been fought in a courtroom, armed with nothing but integrity and the refusal to surrender what she'd rightfully earned. And she had won. That's the end of today's story, but I hope it stays with you for a while. If something in it spoke to you, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and share your thoughts. It's your comments that keep me inspired to make the next one.